Okay, welcome everybody. This is not only one of our weekly group membership calls. I've been doing the membership program now since COVID began. We go live for 30 minutes every week, and I love to bring in special guests and interviews. So Tricia Nelson, I'm bringing in today. I'll read you her bio in a moment. But this is such an important topic. I did open it up to the greater diabetes community at large. But for those of you that aren't a part of the type 1 diabetes crew, we do incredible interviews like this on a regular basis in the crew. And we also go live with me for 30 minutes once a week. I teach things. We have community Q&As, great way to stay on top of your diabetes. So today, I'm going to introduce you Tricia. Tricia Nelson lost 50 pounds by identifying and healing the underlying causes of her emotional eating. And Tricia has spent over 30 years now researching the hidden causes of addictive personalities. She is an emotional eating expert. She's a TEDx speaker and author of the #1 best-selling book, Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating, which of course I have right here. Tricia is the host of the popular podcast, Heal Your Hunger Show, and is a highly regarded speaker. She's been featured on NBC, CBS, Fox, and The List. So without further ado, welcome, Tricia.
Thanks for having me, Jody. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes. Well, Tricia and I, we met years ago, and I've been on my own emotional eating journey for most of my previous years of my life, starting when I was 10. And so as soon as I heard that Tricia was, out in a big way talking about how to heal your hunger and how to treat emotional eating, it just really touched my heart. And then we reconnected just recently. So it's such an important topic, especially in the type 1 diabetes world. Patients with type 1 diabetes have a higher risk of eating disorders due to the mental gymnastics that we must do around food. I always laugh and say we're the only people on the earth that can feel guilty for eating a banana. So it's such an important topic. I know I certainly suffered silently for I don't know how many years before I ended up in a eating disorder rehab center for 2 months. So that was, in my late 20s. So Tricia, thank you so much for being here. And let's start with, so everybody gets to know your background. Please share what your journey with emotional eating is, and how you got from your own emotional eating patterns when you were younger to now, being this famous Heal Your Hunger expert.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's definitely, I think journey is such a great word, maybe overused, but it's so apt, right? Because our relationship with food is a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for me, as a kid, just loved food. I just love to eat. I love to cook. I love to serve food to other people, go out to restaurants. It was just the most exciting thing for me, and that wouldn't have been a problem, except I gained weight really easily. And by age 21, I was 50 pounds overweight. And that was super painful for me. Like I was bigger than my friends. I had a roll on my tummy that I would scrunch up in my hands, and imagine cutting off, like you cut fat off the side of a steak. And I thought about getting some rare disease where I'd automatically lose weight without having to go on a diet. So I was kind of desperate. And when I did diet, I'd lose weight and then put it right back on.
And so here's Tricia as a kid.
There you go. Aw, little angel, chubby cheeks.
Yeah.
I had a friend whose mom called me Butterball, and she thought she was being nice. And I'm like, no, that doesn't make me feel better. So, right? Because it is so painful.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So I was just plagued with this thing, and no diet I tried worked for me. So I'd go on diets and I could lose weight, but I always put it back on. And I had like 5 different sizes of pants in my closet because I never knew what size I'd be. And it was this roller coaster ride, up 40, down 30, up 10. And I was very humiliated by my lack of control around food. And I also I got pretty early on, I tried so many things that I realized diets weren't going to work for me. And that, of course, made me feel more alone and afraid, because that's what everybody tells you to do, like eat
Yeah.
less, exercise more. Like it's simple math, and I'm like, yeah, but I can't do that for a sustained length of time. So I was so blessed to meet somebody who talked to me about emotional eating and said, look, food isn't your problem, it's your solution, and so you're
Ooh,
eating,
that's powerful.
right? So you're eating to solve some kind of emotional issue, and that was a problem for me, and that's what got me into trouble time and time again. And so when I started to look at that problem, it helped me so much. It helped me. Can we hold on one second? Somebody. Um, so I basically was blessed to find out about emotional eating early on in my life, and to realize that, diets weren't going to solve my problem. I need to go deeper. And yet I'd been in therapy for a long time. So it wasn't therapy that I needed either. Not that there's anything wrong with therapy, but to solve my food problem, talking about my emotions and in therapy didn't bring me to a
Mhm.
solution either. So it was really the unique combination of getting help from somebody who had healed from their problems, and their food problems specifically. Okay, that's a really important qualifier. My mentor had been morbidly obese, lost the weight, and was showing me how to do that through non-diet means. Okay. And the thing is, my experience is most people who have been on the diet roller coaster ride for a long time aren't ignorant about what to eat. Like, right? Like, we're kind of clear that
Yeah,
salads are better than pizza, right? So I wasn't a
yeah.
dummy, but I couldn't do the healthy eating part. That's what I couldn't do. So addressing the emotions, addressing my stress level, having the ability to, reprioritize my life, create boundaries with my time. There was a lot that went into creating my cravings that had nothing to do with food,
Absolutely.
and so that was really, really important. So
I
so
just
all
want
that
to pause,
together
yeah, and
helped.
just
Yeah.
highlight. I just want to pause and highlight, because this is such an important point, that many people don't even know that emotions are driving their eating.
They don't know. It's like, no, I just like food. Like, and I thought the same thing, Jody. I'm like, I just like food. What is this emotional eating thing? It's ridiculous. But that's in part because it's working. Like when you eat to cover your emotions, you don't know you have emotions, in which case you're like, I'm not an emotional eater. Right. And so it takes some unraveling. But the nice thing is, and the thing why I'm so grateful to be here talking about this, is that once you start to know about emotional eating, you can't unknow it. And so
Yes.
right? And so you start to observe your behaviors. And I'm like, there's something off about that. Like, and I started looking at I'd go out to lunch with friends, and they'd order a sandwich and it would come with fries. They'd eat their sandwich and pick up their fries. Well, I'd eat my fries and pick up my sandwich. And I'd be like, there's something different about me. Like, one of these pictures is not like the others,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Or they could
yeah.
even leave a fry or two on their plate, right?
Well,
That's
and
that's
why would anybody do that?
why would I that's what I have felt for years about dessert, right? I I look at people and I'm like, how do you not finish every bite of dessert?
Yeah, exactly.
I still have a,
So,
you know, I mean, once an emotional eater, I think maybe always an emotional eater, but
yes.
I'm much better than I ever was. That's for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's, it was departing from the whole diet culture and
Mhm.
taking this journey within, but in a very, systematic way. And that's what I try to do, is really, I created a system for people to do this. So I take the guesswork out of it, because you hear
Brilliant.
a lot of advice out there that sounds good, but if you're an emotional eater, you can't do it. Like,
Absolutely.
intuitive eating. Like, people are like, "Oh, just do it intuitive eating." Well, it's a great concept, but I would intuit that I should eat far more than I should.
Right. Right.
So my
Absolutely.
intuition was off too, you know.
So many
So,
people I've heard say, "Oh yeah, you just eat less." I'm like, I mean, if it was that simple,
Yeah.
You have some great statistics in your book about, how many millions of dollars are spent in the diet industry, and close to 70% of American adults are either overweight or obese. That's 7 out of 10 people. Each year, 45 million people in this country go on a diet. US consumers spend, this one blew my mind, $109 million every day on diet and weight loss products. Annually, weight loss is a 60 billion industry. Right now on Amazon, there are 65,000 weight loss books and 365,000 fitness books. So, if it was one and done, we wouldn't need 65,000 weight loss books.
It's like, and they all say the same thing, like, eat more vegetables. Like, tell me something I don't know.
Yeah. So I find it very actually relieving to realize that there's something that we can dig deeper and actually really heal, right? Because people always love to think about willpower. And I'm like, if you heal emotional eating, willpower is really not so necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't have willpower. I mean, it's like that's gone a long time ago. If I ever had it, and I think that I think so many emotional eaters blame themselves.
Yes.
Because they are emotional eaters and they're trying to do the thing, right? The diet, the food plan, the eat less plan.
Yep.
And they can't, and they blame themselves. And this is part of being an emotional eater. We tend to take on the guilt, right? We forget to say, maybe there's something wrong with that plan. And instead we say, maybe there's something wrong with me.
Ooh, that's a good distinction. Yeah. So my next question is, how does one know? So maybe people are thinking, how does someone know if they're an emotional eater or a food addict?
Yeah, so it's so funny because it's to me it's a spectrum. Like, a lot of people are trying to figure this out, and I feel like we're all emotional eaters to some degree.
That's a good point.
Right? I mean, it's like, I think we're hardwired to have an emotional connection with food. And so so that we are still interested in eating. It's important for the subsistence of our species. So basically, I think it's a spectrum. I think everybody's on the spectrum. Obviously, people who can control what they eat, not be obsessed with food, not gain weight in a frenetic way. That's somebody on the low end of the spectrum, obviously. But somebody on the high end of the spectrum is somebody who has very little control and has a lot of consequences. Control and consequences. To me, that's what qualifies where you are on the spectrum. How much control do you have, and how many consequences do you have? So think about it. If somebody goes on a cruise, they eat too much cheese and wine and desserts, they gain 5 pounds, not a huge consequence. And if they come home and they can like get it off of them really quickly by jogging, an extra however long, basically they're gonna be, doing fine. They've got control. Versus somebody who, like me, puts on weight or starts eating and then goes down the rabbit hole, for weeks on end and can't pull themselves back. That's somebody, right, who's more of a food addict. Really, really crazy. So basically, that's one thing. That's the control part. The consequence part is, like I said, 5 pounds, maybe not a big consequence, but if you've been gaining and losing for years, guess what? You are having a lot of consequences. Your body is screaming at you. You've got maybe autoimmune issues, maybe you've got joint issues, heart issues, diabetes, obviously. So these are things that are causing problems for people, and those are the ones on more of the high end of the spectrum.
Yeah. I want to read this part. I underlined while I was reading your book today. So if this is a new concept to you, you may be wondering what exactly emotional eating is. Simply, it's using food to quiet or stuff emotions. Put another way, emotional eating is using food to meet the needs beyond physical nourishment. What are these needs? These are social needs, loneliness, for example, emotional needs, for comfort, companionship. Dealing with people can be challenging, so we resort to having comfort from food, mental needs, and spiritual needs. So I just loved how you so clearly laid out, like, well, what are we hungry for? What are we so hungry for? And this is it right here: social acceptance, emotional comfort, mental freedom, spiritual, seekers. Beautiful. It's so beautifully spelled out that way.
Oh, thank you. And it's really true. And I think you could sum it all up as craving connection.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's really why we had so many people struggling during the pandemic. It's like we were more isolated than ever. Our lives were turned upside down. We lost so much connection and community.
Yeah.
And my experience is that's really what we're craving. So it's
Wow.
so important that we don't try to overcome these problems in a vacuum on our own.
Oh.
And we really have to get support. Because it's really the deeper nourishment that we're craving.
Okay. So how does one differentiate between emotional hunger and physical hunger then?
My experience is that if somebody is a snacker or they're nibbling all day long, it's hard to tell. Okay, it's just hard to tell because you feel kind of numbed out. And that's, of course, why people are snackers and nibblers, because they basically are kind of putting. My experience is we love carbs, we love sugar. That's usually our go-to snack foods because they do anesthetize our pain. So something I talk about in the book is the PEP formula. So we use food as a painkiller. PEP is an acronym. So the first P is painkiller, the E is escape, and the other P is punishment. So we use food in these ways, and not that we're conscious of it, just like we're not conscious that we're emotional eaters. But if you think about it, when you have things that are uncomfortable in your life and you just go to the refrigerator, we're trying to numb that uncomfortable feeling, and if sorry about the background noise, we eat for escape, and most of that is escaping our heads. Like we just want to get out of our heads, and so, I mean, it's like, give me a break.
Laughed when I read that because I could so relate.
Totally. It's like we overeaters are overthinkers. So we think everything to death, and so sometimes we're like, can I just like step out of my head, please? And that's where my binges often came for food and TV. Those were my way to escape my own brain. And the last P, punishment, that's a little more counterintuitive because it's like, no, food is my reward. But if we go overboard and we end up feeling sick and then we're berating ourselves and then we're not fitting in our pants, it's like, that feels more like a punishment, and my experience is as overeaters, we tend to be overfeelers and we feel guilty a lot. Like you said, guilty for eating a banana. We feel guilty a lot, and we take things harder. We feel things deeper, and so oftentimes we're just beating ourselves up with those unhealthy choices.
Well, I'm sure you can't see the punishment until we finish the last bite and then feel horrible.
Right. But the first bite, usually, if we pay attention, we realize that when we go into that first bite, oftentimes, depending on what the food is, it could end up feeling horrible. If it's a food we typically lose control over, but then we delude ourselves and say, oh no, it's gonna be different this time. I'm not gonna do that this time. Right. And so there's the mental aspect of it too, where we fool ourselves and we tell ourselves a story. We're rationalizing our choices because we on an emotional level we need the food, so we tell ourselves a story about how, oh no, I'm just gonna have one. I call that the just one theory. It's never just one, let's be clear. I'm just gonna have one, or it's not gonna be a big deal this time because I'm gonna exercise tomorrow. And it's hard to exercise away a binge in my experience. I couldn't do it. I eat more than I could possibly exercise away. So I'm just saying we rationalize our unhealthy choices because on some emotional level we feel like we need that food. Like it really is serving as an emotional crutch for us, and it's it's kind of, if you dig a little deeper, my experience is these foods growing up, if you had an unhappy childhood or dysfunction in your home or abuse in your home, as a kid, we didn't have a lot of options to escape, ways to escape, right? We couldn't go score drugs downtown. It's like, what's in the refrigerator? And that helped us get through when
Wow.
we had abuse as kids, and many emotional eaters did, unfortunately. And so it's a habit that starts at a very young age,
Mm-hmm.
and we turn to it, and in a sense it saved our lives,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, if I didn't have the food as a kid, I don't know what I would have done. Like, it softened the edges
Yes.
for sure,
Yes.
right? So I can be grateful for that, but and also be compassionate with myself when I do have this like deep compulsion, as if my life depends on eating that chocolate bar,
Yes.
because there's a part of me, maybe that little girl or the amygdala, I don't know what, but it believes, in a sense, we're still hooked into that life and death urgency that we had as a kid, where food did save our life.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
it
such a
it
good
did
point.
the job,
It's
you
such a good
know?
point. Yeah. Yeah. So well said. And such an important topic. Um, well, I wanted to do, wrap. If you guys have questions, for those of you on live, please put them in the chat. We will have a few, probably 10 minutes for questions, but let's get into solution. Um, so we've very clearly identified the problem. We've identified why people are emotional eaters, and hopefully help people that maybe it hasn't realized that, that they are, right? But I always love the definition of, if you feel like it's getting in the way of your life, if it's causing you stress and overwhelm, food, then that's pretty clear red flag that something unhealthy is going on, right? People that just eat when they're hungry and stop when they're full, they pretty much don't question if they have a problem. If you sense that you have an uncomfortable relationship with food, then that's kind of a clear indication. So we've identified that, we've uncovered it, we're talking about it, we're bringing it to the surface. So what now?
Yeah, I think and I think it's great we're having the conversation. So thank you so much for this. I think it's just really important to realize that if you could have solved it on your own, you probably would have by now, and don't consider it like some mark of shame that you can't. My experience with emotional eaters is we're embarrassed by the fact that we're powerless over a cookie, and the thing is, though, it's, again, if we have this since childhood, it's a lifelong addictive habit, and it's harder than heroin or cocaine or alcohol because you can't stop cold turkey.
Exactly.
Right? And so it's like, I want people to let themselves off the hook and stop beating themselves up, because we're always shoulding on ourselves. I should be able to stop this. I should be able to follow the diet. No, this is a lifelong addictive habit, and you have to take the substance out of the refrigerator 3 times a day and somehow getting it back in the refrigerator without it beating you up, and making you feel terrible.
Yeah.
So I think people need to realize, first of all, it is an addictive habit.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it in spite of negative health consequences, like if your doctors told you you've got to stop eating these foods and you eat them anyway, that's kind of like a definition of an addiction, where you do it in spite of it hurting you and you have full knowledge of what it's doing to you.
And
So
that's especially you know, unique in type 1 diabetes is, certain foods really can hurt us even more. That's why I laughed about the banana. Like, a banana is not ideal for us because of the sugar content, right? So how many times, but it becomes a much more complicated issue. Sometimes we just feel burnout on dealing with type 1 diabetes, but it's a it's definitely a complicated scenario of really separating out diabetes burnout, diabetes rebellion, and emotional eating. But even if of type 1 and we're rebelling and we're like, I can't stand it, I'm going to have a bunch of carbs, rebellion, you can say, no, I'm not an emotional eater, I'm just rebellious. Well, that is your emotions that are fueling the rebellion. So
yes, 100%. People, you're like, oh, I'm just defiant. No, you're dependent. Like you're dependent and
yeah,
you don't feel like you can let it go. And it's understandable. And my experience is, to answer your question, where do we go from here? You have to build new tools to depend on, so you don't, to replace the emotional dependence you have on food, on carbs. And it's like, we have to build those tools. The problem with diets is they give you no other tools.
no
They
tools.
take away your number one coping tool, your
Yeah,
number 1, 2, and 3 coping tool, and say, go get them, tiger. And it
yeah.
doesn't work. Like, we have to transfer our dependence on new tools for getting by, because life is stressful, and we need support, we need help. And so developing those new tools is absolutely vital. Tools of self-care, tools of getting support through community, addressing the underlying causes and the untrue belief that
Mm.
we've held for so long. These are all ways that we can start turning the ship around.
I know in your book, can I read these 7 steps?
Of course.
Okay, so Tricia's book, 7 steps to end emotional eating now. One, as you've already mentioned, connection and community, so important. Centeredness, clean eating, communication, consciousness, causes, and courage. So clearly, Tricia can speak for an hour probably on each one of those things, and we don't have time for that today. But the point is today to bring the topic up, to bring it to the top of your mind, to have you perhaps do your own inventory of kind of where you're at, and to be inspired that there are people like Tricia and myself that have grown and adopted new habits, right? So how can people learn more about your work, and how can they follow you and find out how to get the support that they're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have an event coming up. It's kind of really cool timing. So I have this event coming up called Make Peace with Food, Love Your Body, Love Your Food, Love Your Life. I'm actually offering to Jody's peeps, okay? So anybody in her community, an opportunity to come actually free of charge. It's a $97 ticket usually, but you can actually come free of charge. And so we can put the link in the chat here. Did you get a new link from Caitlin, by the way? She said she sent it, but you didn't. So maybe when you send out the
Recording.
you know what I can do? You know what I'll do? I'm gonna put the link here, and I'm gonna take a screenshot of the people. If anybody here wants to take advantage of this, I'm gonna go ahead and I'll share with you, okay, this event and show it to you, and then I'll work it out. So affiliate to make sure that we know you guys are coming from Jody's community, and you can come for free. So let me share this with you.
And it's super easy to put it in the recording, so it's not a problem. And we have, like I said, we had over 30 people register, so I have no doubt that people will be eager to watch the recording, so I can include that in the email with them.
Cool. So will you just let me share the screen, and I'll share with you kind of a little about the event. It's just great timing because this event's happening this week. And what it is, it's